Ground rules here. We have a lot of people in the room. We also have the opportunity to submit questions for Senator Johnson online. We're going to try to have a mix of face-to-face questions here at the 3 microphones that are set up, and there's a 4th in the back, and online questions. Senator Johnson, he's ready to go. So hopefully you'll have your questions ready. And Birkin is going to do introductions. Senator Johnson is going to talk to us for a few minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So again, we're delighted you're here, and we're exceptionally grateful to Senator Johnson for taking the time to visit us, especially with all of the work that he has to do in Washington. So thank you. Nathan, you're on.
Thank you, President Raymond, and good morning, Senator Johnson. Good morning, MCW community. We're really thrilled to have all of you here today. My name is Nathan Birkin. I'm the Vice President of Government Relations here at MCW. It's my real pleasure to welcome and introduce Senator Ron Johnson for our Public Policy Speaker Series. This series was created after President Raymond presented a 9-point plan in the summer of 2023 to talk about and clarify MCW's commitment to freedom of expression. Point 9 of that plan included a request to our Office of Government Relations to create a regular cadence of visits from our governmental officials, specifically in formats which would be open to the entire MCW community. So that request led to creating the MCW Public Policy Speaker Series, which is co-sponsored by the Office of the President and the Office of Government Relations. The series is designed to ensure that MCW maintains constructive relationships with our elected officials across the balanced diversity of political perspectives, as well as across federal, state, and local governments. The series also aims to provide our community with visibility into the priorities of our governmental officials, to also create institutional insight and institutional connection. So our goal is to secure 4 speakers for every academic year. I'm just going to move this. Our goal is to secure 4 speakers for each academic year with a equal partisan representation. So earlier we kicked off the series with Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley last November, and then we had Assembly Minority Leader Greta Neubauer in December, JFC co-chair in the state of Wisconsin, Howard Markline, and now Senator Johnson is rounding out our 4th speaker for this academic year. Please know that while we seek to secure an equal representation of partisan balance, we are inviting each of the speakers to speak from their own personal and political and public policy values. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Senator Johnson. Senator Johnson was elected to the U.S. Senate in 2010 after running a successful manufacturing business in Oshkosh, Wisconsin for 30 years. From 2015 until 2021, he served as chair of the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, and he remains a member of that committee today. He currently serves as the chairman of the Subcommittee on Investigations and is also on the Committee on the Budget, the Committee on Finance, and the Committee on Aging. Senator Johnson was re-elected to his 3rd term in the U.S. Senate in 2022 and resides in Oshkosh with his wife, Jane. They have 3 children and 4 grandchildren. So with that, I'm honored and pleasured to introduce Senator Johnson to the podium.
Well, thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Dr. Raymond. One thing I've noticed in the U.S. Senate is the doctors who serve in the Senate always prefer being referred to as doctor as opposed to senator, and I guess I definitely agree with that. Let me start. I think some of you know my story. Can you hear me, by the way? Is that okay? Some of you know my story as it relates to this institution and Milwaukee Children's Hospital, but I want to quick repeat it before we get into some of the specifics. Our first child was born with transposition of the great arteries. In Neenah, rushed down here, first day of life, a wonderful man, Dr. John Thomas, came in 1:30 in the morning, did balloon septostomy to get her downstream. 8 months later, we went over to Minneapolis to do a Schumacher atrial reversal. So her atrium of her heart now operates backwards, but she's 42 years old, mother of 2 children through surrogacy. a nurse practitioner herself who served at Milwaukee Children's for a number of years. So I want to lay that out to show you what deep respect and appreciation I have for the medical community, for doctors and nurses. They saved her life. Quite honestly, the pharmaceutical industry right now with the beta blockers she's on to manage her heart rhythm and stuff. Again, I understand, how wonderful medicine is and can be and needs to be, quite honestly. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to start this out a little more unusually with a little bit of a history lesson. We're in the midst now of the battle over the one big beautiful bill. I've been reasonably outspoken in terms of the fact that it just simply doesn't meet the moment. We're mortgaging our children's future. That's why I ran. I ran in 2010 for two reasons. I knew Obamacare would not work. It hasn't. And we were mortgaging our kids' future. Back then, we were $14 trillion in debt. Now we're 37 on a path over the next 10 years to hit 60. I'm not sure we will before we really hit the debt bomb. But a little history lesson, 1930. The federal government spent about 3.5% of our GDP. State and local governments spent about 9.1%. So total government spending less than 100 years ago was 12.6%. Last year, the federal government consumed 23.4% of our GDP. Almost a quarter of our economy, our government is spending. State and local governments were 16.8% for a whopping total of 40%. I mean, that's approaching a socialistic society, which quite honestly, history does not shows that those don't work, okay? That's what we're butting up against. So in 100 years, we've increased the take of government by more than threefold. That's a problem. World War II, next little history lesson. We entered World War II spending about 11.7% of GDP. We had the New Deal, so we went from 3.5 to 11.4%. The height of the war, government spending hit 41%. But back then, we were governed by the greatest generation, serious individuals. People realized, well, we can't keep spending at a wartime level. We have to return to a pre-war level spending. So by 1948, we were actually below 11.7%. We were spending 11.4%. Now, again, I just pointed out that today we're spending 23.4%. So we've more than doubled that. And the question you have to ask, well, did it work? Are we getting the bang from the buck? If you haven't ever listened to Eisenhower's farewell address, it's famous for him warning about the military-industrial complex, which we didn't heed that warning. Not at all. But there were actually four things he warned us about. The second warning was he cautioned us about public financing of science and research. He said it would result in a technological and scientific elite, individuals who would drive public policy. I would argue that would corrupt the process, and I think we've seen that. His third warning was something we've completely not taken advantage of or heeded. We can't plunder our children's future. By the way, that's what we're doing. $37 trillion in debt. Do you understand the transfer of wealth from young to old? It's wrong. It's immoral. It has to stop. Us oldsters have to understand we need to preserve this nation for our children. We can't burden them with any further debt. It's going to diminish their opportunities, their prospects. But we're still doing it. And quite honestly, most of society, most members of Congress are just whistling by the graveyard. His fourth warning, probably he spent the least amount of time on it, but from my standpoint, I think it was probably the most important warning, the most prescient, quite honestly. He said, we can't allow global society to descend into a state of dreadful fear and hate. Think about that. What drives so much of our public policy right now? What drives the military-industrial complex? Why are they able to consume $1 trillion a year of our GDP? It's always creating fear. It's always some evil government somewhere around the world. We've got to intervene. What drove what I would consider our miserably failed response to COVID? Fear. and hate. That's exactly what politicians do. They drive wedge figures. They create hate. They tell this group, that group hates you. Hate them. So again, my role as a U.S. Senator, whether you agree with me or disagree, and I think you probably disagree with a lot of what I say, is I'm just trying to tell people as best as I can what I believe and perceive as the truth. And the truth, from my perspective, and whether you agree or disagree, that's fine, is we have gone way beyond the vision of our founding fathers in terms of a limited government constrained within the enumerated powers. Way beyond. We busted out of that, really started during the Great Depression with the New Deal. And it's not working. And as it relates to medicine, and this is something I hope you all take to heart, because this is incredibly serious. I haven't looked up the poll, but I just heard Marty McCary on an interview refer to a poll that prior to the pandemic, the medical profession had the confidence of 70% of the American public. Now it's in the 40s. That's a dramatic reduction in the confidence. And I can just tell you personally, as well as a lot of people I know, they no longer trust their doctors. They don't. And I think that's tragic. So you have to recognize that reality, that the first step in solving any problem is admitting you have one. I think that's something the medical establishment must, it has to. I want you to. I want you to be able to restore that confidence. But the only way you do that is you have to restore integrity to science, which has been corrupted. We need to restore integrity to our federal health agencies, which have been corrupted. Again, this growth in government, what is a one-word definition of government? I would argue it is power. And as Lord Acton very astutely pointed out, power corrupts. And I'm there, I see it. I think every one of these federal agencies designed to regulate big business or large corporations or whatever to protect the public. What has happened is those large entities, they're not stupid, they're pretty smart. They figure out how to survive over-regulation, and not only survive it, but they learn how to turn it to their own advantage. They capture the agencies, they capture the departments to their own benefit, to the detriment of their competitors and to the detriment of the public. And we've seen that literally just across the board. So my final point, I am a big believer in the free market system. It's not perfect, but there's been no other economic system devised that more efficiently allocates capital, but also guarantees three basic things: the lowest possible price, the highest possible quality, the highest level of customer service. And I would argue in the two areas of economy that we are just habitually dissatisfied with: education and medicine. And this is an institution that handles both. The reason we're dissatisfied with them is we've largely driven out the benefit of free market competition out of those areas of our economy, with pretty much a monopoly type of situation, oligopoly of power within medicine and in education. You know, teachers unions, all that type of thing. So again, you don't have those free market benefits flowing through here. And as I've sat through Senate Finance Committee hearings and on a host of issues, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, you always hear out of all the witnesses, Republican or Democrat, we have to return consumerism into medicine. But every solution I've seen proposed reduces consumerism. It's a third-party payer system. You know, less than 100 years ago, consumers, patients paid for basically 9 cents or 90 cents out of every dollar. Only 10 cents, only 10% was paid for by some third party. Now that's pretty well been reversed. So patients don't know what things cost. You guys don't know what you're charging people. Those are accountants dealing with insurance companies and Medicare and Medicaid. So again, we've driven that free market competition, that free market benefit out of healthcare. So with that, I'll shut up and look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. I think you've given us a lot to think about and a lot to ask questions about. I'm going to start with a couple of questions that were submitted online, and then we'll get to the questions here in the room. The first question has really, you mentioned Dr. John Thomas, who recently passed, and he was really a big believer in taking the best care possible of kids. And because children's is 50% Medicaid population, we're just wondering, how could you reconcile your criticisms of Medicaid with still being here to take care of every child that has an acute need at a place like we have here at Children's Wisconsin?
Because Medicaid is no longer Medicaid. Medicaid is Medicaid that we support to protect the most vulnerable. It was initially designed for people at or below the poverty line, disabled children, pregnant women, again, the vulnerable. Obamacare tacked onto it now what they call Medicaid expansion. And Medicaid, the normal Medicaid was set up as a shared responsibility between the states and the federal government. States were going to run it, but we wanted the states to have skin in the game, so they ran it efficiently, that they wouldn't allow ineligible people on it, that they would watch costs, okay? There would be some incentives to do so. Obamacare was the last attempt to their step in a single payer system. And so what they did is they incentivized the process to get as many people signed up as possible. It worked. And the way they incentivize that is for every dollar of regular Medicaid that a state spends, the federal government kicks in $1.33. For every dollar that the state spends on Medicaid expansion, on single, able-bodied, working-age, childless adults, who really we ought to incentivize to work so they can get insurance through the private sector rather than through Medicaid. For every dollar we spend on those individuals, the federal government kicks in 90 cents. So, or for every dollar you spend, the federal government spends $9. Okay, $1 to $1.33, $1 to $9. Now, here's how the states have gained the system. They started applying provider taxes and provider fees, which is not healthcare expense. That's just driving up the cost of healthcare, but they do it. And the best analogy I can use is, let's say I'm looking at this gentleman right here and say, hey, I got a great deal for you. I got this knucklehead, he's called Uncle Sam over here, who agrees to pay me $18 if you give me 20. So you give me 20 bucks, I'll show him that you've given me $20. He's going to give me 18, then I'll give you your 20 bucks back. That's exactly what's happening in Medicaid. It's why the expenses are exploding. The states don't have skin in the game. They're being more than compensated for it. They're signing up illegal immigrants. They're signing up people who aren't eligible. And it's putting at risk the very people we want to protect. But the way you protect them is keep the system solvent. What I didn't do initially is what we're looking at in terms of our federal budget. Right now, CBO's current estimate is we're going to average $2.2 trillion deficits over the next 10 years. Average it. The one big beautiful bill will expand that amount. That's a rosy scenario. 2.2 trillion, 2,200 billion. And as Elon Musk did, I've got it, by the way, I've got a really good video on my X page where I start out with, all these are all Republican leaders. President Trump starts out, we're going to balance the federal budget, and then there's some version of, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. Yeah, we have a spending problem. It's exploded. It went from $4,400 billion in 2019 to $7,000 billion. That's a 58% increase. Other than World War II, completely unprecedented. And as Elon Musk says in that video, he said, if we don't get control over this, there won't be money for anything. So we are already experiencing a chronic, put in medical terms, we've been in a chronic debt crisis. You realize a dollar you held when I ran 2010 is only worth 68 cents. A dollar you held in 2014 under Obama, when they started Obamacare, is worth 74 cents. A dollar you held in 2019 is only worth 80 cents. That's why you can't afford things. We are devaluing our dollar. That's a nasty way of addressing this. But again, that pales in comparison to an acute debt crisis where all of a sudden you have a failure of the bond market. We can't borrow any money anymore, and all this spending dries up. There won't be, like Elon Musk says, if we don't fix this, there won't be money left for anything. And that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. We're going to take one more online question, and then we'll go to microphone number 3 after this. So this question was submitted by one of our senior scientists who basically says it's been well established that research returns about a 3-fold economic impact in the local communities. What are your thoughts about the proposed reduction in the NIH budget, which is profound, 40%? Wouldn't that decreasing investment in the National Institutes of Health and the partnerships they have with universities be inconsistent with the goal of economic development?
So first of all, for being a very limited government guy, okay, enumerated powers, defense, border security, setting the rules for the road, I actually would support federal funding for basic science and research where there's no economic benefit doing so. There's plenty of research being done where people have an economic benefit for doing so, but we do need, I think, the federal government to invest in that. I have no problem with that. How do you return integrity to it, though? Again, when you have Fauci issuing these grants for 40 years, Fauci got the result he wanted. What I've come to learn, being connected to this, group of people who certainly have a different opinion of all these things, science has been corrupted, just as Eisenhower pretty well predicted. Peer review is a joke, or it can be a joke. They're volunteers. There will oftentimes be peer reviewers who want to tank the study they want to review, so it's not exactly an honest review. They're supposed to, but they don't list their conflicts of interest. I have way too many examples of people who want to get something, just a study, funded or started or approved of. They don't have access to an independent review panel or independent review board because Bill Gates doesn't want them to have it. So again, you have to recognize science has been corrupted. That's the first thing I think Bobby Kennedy has to do, is he has to return integrity to it. You see, he's going to kind of blow off these. Well, you can laugh about it, but again, I'm not the one who say that they're not trusting this medical establishment anymore. That's a reality that you have to face, and you shouldn't laugh at it. So the only way you're going to restore that confidence is restore first integrity of science, which has been corrupted.
With all the scientists in the room who do NIH peer review, including myself, I do need to make sure that we draw a distinction between what I think you're talking about in organized journal peer review versus the peer review system that the National Institutes of Health has, which is all volunteer, but it is a party of uninterested, objective scientists who are trying to do their very best.
Okay. So it can be, but in many cases it's not. And that's just a reality. You can deny that reality as much as you want. It can be, but in many cases it's not. Go ahead.
Okay, I beg to differ, and I think I speak for most of the people who have. I just want to say the one thing I appreciate about Senator Johnson, and we've been interacting for many years, is he's willing to listen to you. So we do have people at the microphone. So please, if we prefer that you don't go into a soliloquy with a long opening statement, that you're really here to ask questions of Senator Johnson. So we're going to go to microphone number 3.
Let me quickly say, I appreciate that he tolerates me. Go ahead.
Grant Stinson, Dr. Grant Stinson, you can call me Grant. I'm not really good at public speaking, so I wrote some stuff down. I appreciate you coming out here and listening to us. I'm not good at public speaking. One of the things that I was told about public speaking is to know your audience. And you apparently didn't get that. As a preface to my short question, for months of standing idly by while lawlessness grift, cruelty, pseudoscience, and pardons are used as tools to benefit the rich and powerful. And for all of that, shame on you. My question is, what have you done in the last week? Not performative, what have you actually done to help those in this audience and others like them all over the state and all over the nation who are struggling due to clear incompetence in leadership at institutions like the DOD, the NIH, the FDA, HHS, and others that so many people rely on? And if you can answer that in the form of 5 bullets, that would be helpful.
So what I've been doing, and there aren't a whole lot of us of it, in doing this, is I've been standing up to President Trump and the One Big Beautiful Bill, which isn't me in the moment, which again will allow us not only to incur $22 trillion additional deficit spending, $2.2 trillion a year, probably expand it to about 26, even beyond that. So I've been doing a lot of work, digging up the information, the facts and figures. I don't think you've ever heard these figures from any other public official. I've been relentless about it. Got up early to get on Maria to make this point. I'll do it relentlessly. Get on as soon as I get done with this. I'll go on more media to talk about the reality of the situation. That's what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to lay out the reality. And you can deny the fact that the public has lost confidence in the medical establishment, but that's reality. Again, ignore it at your own peril. Ignore it at medicine's peril. But I think listen, I work my tail off, and I just do things. And I point truths out. Again, my truths, my beliefs that other people aren't willing to do.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Senator Johnson, for answering the question. Microphone number 2, identify yourself, ask a question.
Hi, Senator Johnson. My name is Vlad Friedman. I'm a graduate student here. I'm supposed to be defending my dissertation this summer, but I don't really have clear future job prospects because of everything that's happening. Part of my dissertation as a neuroscientist is on fear learning. So I actually agree with you. There's a lot of fear that drives politics, but it seems to me that you fear a lot as well. You fear that technological and scientific elite. You fear immigrants who might be taking benefits you think they don't deserve. You fear your conception of socialism. So what are you doing to reflect and confront your own fears?
First of all, I'm not fearful of it. I'm just pointing out the destructive tendencies of those problems. I'm willing to admit we have problems. Again, you're not going to solve the problem unless you admit it was a clear and present danger to allow millions of people completely unvetted members. And again, I was chairman of Homeland Security. I know some of the people that came in here, members of drug trafficking rings, transnational criminal organizations, unbelievably violent gangs. Okay, the human truck. You're afraid, Ron. I'm really not. I'm pretty relaxed here, but I guess we'll go on to number 1.
Yeah. Microphone number 1.
Dave Margolis, chair of the Department of Pediatrics at the Medical College of Wisconsin, pediatrician and chief at Children's. Like you, a grandfather, a father, and somebody who's been significantly influenced by Dr. John Thomas. I appreciate your focus on children. I would like to know, as a legislature, part of the body of 100 in the Senate, with your influence in legislation as well as the NIH, how you commit to supporting what is killing children the most in the United States of America, which is bullet versus kid.
So I'm a firm believer in the Second Amendment. I don't know what stats you are in terms of, listen, I know one of the reasons my daughter left nursing, when she just couldn't handle the violence she saw here in Milwaukee. So I'm fully aware of that. But we've got something like 10,000 gun control laws on the books. They don't work. So adding another one's not going to solve that problem. So again, I don't know what you're, again, I'm in
support to committing our comprehensive comprehensive center for injury prevention.
I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. Sorry.
Microphone number 3.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I wanted to say that I agree with you in terms of that there are benefits to free market, And I wanted to say that, despite disagreeing with many of your positions, I appreciate that you have been more outspoken recently about the direction where the federal administration is going than many of your Republican colleagues, and I appreciate you for that. My question to you is, if you recognize that monopoly kills free market, and that's bad for everybody, how do you propose we prevent free market from becoming a monopoly without government regulation?
Again, I'm not opposed to all government regulations. I don't think we're keeping up at all in terms of antitrust. It's tough. I mean, now you've got, for example, Google, these social media companies just controlling all information, but they're not charging for it. So our regulations haven't caught up with that fact. If there's not economic harm, that there's no reason for breaking them up. So again, I don't think we've done a very good job of controlling this. I think it's unfortunate that we have these very large hospital groups, all these institutions that, again, I like the concept of independent doctors, independent clinics. We need some large institutions to do some large things, but again, I think what we have now, doctors and nurses, rather than being at the top of the treatment pyramid, they're being crushed at the bottom. And people like Anthony Fauci are dictating this, certainly the Medicare reimbursement thing, insurance. All these large groups are telling doctors how to practice medicine. And I think that's just screwed things up. I want to reverse that. I want to put doctors and nurses back at the top of the treatment pyramid and have these other institutions be helpful to them, have true science that they can depend on, not have being corrupted. By the way, there's the head of the New England Journal of Medicine, Marcia Angel, resigned in the year 2000. About 10 years later, she started writing about why she didn't like talking about this, but it's because she had no faith in the studies they were publishing in the New England Journal of Medicine. So again, this has been known. You had Wiley Publishing. I think they had to literally just take down 19 or 20 some publications, something like 11,000 different studies. They were corrupted. You can't repeat some of this stuff. They provide these studies, they don't provide the data. So again, I'm sorry, guys. Listen, maybe all of your studies are completely integrity and all your peer reviewers are just people of integrity. They're not trying to undermine anybody, but that's not universally true.
I'm sorry, but I think you're trying to tell us something that we are deeply aware of, because that's what we do every day. We know what the limitations and the failures in our system are. So nobody's here denying that there aren't failures in the peer review system or that there aren't studies that are not replicable. So,
but the reaction of the audience has seemed like you are denying that. But
no, what we are denying is that the system is fundamentally corrupt, and we know that because we're part of the system.
Good. Well, help us fix it. Help RFK Jr. fix it rather than ridicule him.
But you haven't answered my question. Like, would you support federal regulation to break down these big companies into smaller companies?
Again, it's hard to exactly know what specifically you're asking me to do. We do need some government regulation. In general, the government overregulates. When the government gets involved, for example, in the marketplace, it screws things up.
Yes, but in this case, you would admit that the government is not overregulated. The government is underregulated.
Now, I would say it's been overregulated, captured by the people that are in control now. Okay, so they've turned the regulation to their advantage. They've captured the agencies to their benefit. And so everything's basically reinforcing the fact that we have these large organizations who are in charge. So no, I'd love to see that all broken up.
But you have no idea how to do that.
But we do need to ask other good questions, good interchange. What was your name?
Leo Fernandino, faculty in neurology.
Thank you for the questions. Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Hey, I'm Chris in dermatology. I wanted to thank you for coming out. I know you really haven't been doing anything public, so I appreciate you coming out to here. I appreciate that you're going to the press club. It'd be great if the rest of your constituents could also have an opportunity to speak to you instead of hiding behind.
So just to refute that real quick, I do multiple telephone town halls where you literally have thousands of people on the call. It's not like people don't know what my views are in place, because I'm on media all the time, very accessible to press.
You mentioned that there's been the drop in trust in healthcare, in doctors, in the medical field has dropped so much, especially since COVID. And let's be honest, it's not the doctors, it's not the medical field that said, hey, don't trust us. That is coming from the regime from 2016 to 2020 and now 2025 and onward. So for you to say that there's a problem and that there's hate and nobody trusts you guys, that's due to you.
I disagree.
Thank you. So I just, I wanted to.
Can you get close to your mouth? So
I can, yes. So I wanted to commend you for coming to an institution of science and medicine that has recently been so harmed by your administration's policies and your own votes. And also, I'm truly intrigued by your, thoughts about speaking your truth to a group and the contemporaries of the researchers and scientists and physicians who saved your daughter's life, despite speaking to everybody with such disrespect for the work that they're doing. As a surgeon, I do know exactly what I'm charging my patients or what the institution is charging our patients for the services that we provide. And I will say that most of the people who are going to be disproportionately affected by the policies that are being enacted are your voters. These are often rural patients, these are veterans, these are elderly patients. And I am very informed, as is most of the room, informed on these policies, much more than I think you're giving us credit for, as well as the real world impact of the work that we're doing and these policies. So have you given any thought to reflecting on the damage to your specific voter pool and the people who have supported getting you into office, so that when they are losing their house and losing their livelihood, I can discuss some of those issues with them?
but you seem to be hung up like all I care about are my voters. So I'm concerned about the medical profession. I'm concerned about the fact that faith is eroded in it. I would say partly because you pushed a COVID injection that literally did kill people, did permanently disable them. You can shake your head like that didn't happen. It happened, and the fact that you continue to deny it, in general, not necessarily individuals, doesn't help people's faith in you. So again, I've spent a lot of time with the vaccine injured. I've seen the stats. I've seen how NIH covered it up, how they knew about myocarditis and simply didn't issue the warning. So again.
Senator Johnson, let me speak for some of the people in the audience just to make sure that it's clear. I don't think the majority of people here deny that vaccines and other medications can have unintended consequences and side effects. It's really the balance between the good that's done and the harm that is possible. And I think everyone would agree that to the extent possible, we should be disclosing what the risks and the benefits of any therapeutic are. I think
and they didn't.
Right?
And they didn't. They didn't.
All right.
They didn't.
I would say I did read your myocarditis work recently, and myocarditis is inflammation of the heart muscle, and the long-term implications of having that really aren't clear, especially when you have COVID, which has an 8 to 20 times more higher likelihood of causing myocarditis than the mRNA vaccines do.
I'd love to get in the color here and talk to the other people that are more qualified. But let's face it, should we talk about the lies told to us? I mean, so we were lied to that the injection would stay in our arm. They knew it wouldn't. They knew it was encapsulated in lipid nanoparticle, that it was designed to permeate difficult to permeate barriers. They had the biodistribution study in rats that the Japanese regulators found out biodistributed all over the place. Ended up concentrating the ovaries and the adrenal glands. But we were lied to. So no, it's going to stay right there. Well, and then the mRNA, it dissolves. No, it was modified mRNA. It's circulating in our body now for years. It's the spike proteins in tumors. It's in heart at the autopsy. And we were just utterly lied to. You can deny that fact, but we were lied to. And when people get lied to, they lose faith in those people who lied to us.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Johnson. Microphone number 3.
Hi, thanks, Senator, for your time. My name is Jim McCarthy. I'm an inpatient physician at Freighter and at Children's. I feel a little bit bad because I spent this time in line, and your last statement got a little ahead of my question, but So you've been a vocal advocate for patients to have access to treatments like hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, even when some of the evidence in journals might say it's not effective or even harmful. Given your stance,
What's harmful about ivermectin?
liver failure, kidney problems.
What's harmful about remdesivir?
Can also cause
Kidney
liver
failure?
issue. It can cause liver problems. Anyway, getting to my question.
Okay.
Given your stance and your strong support for patient autonomy, patient freedom of choice, are you planning to make statements against the NIH and CDC plans to restrict access to COVID-19 boosters?
I have, and I'll let, I understand the position that RFK Jr. is in. He wants to restore integrity to science. He's going to demand that they will do a decent cost-benefit analysis based on, research with integrity. I think that's where we got to go. It's going to take some time.
But the current proposal is to restrict access to booster vaccines, and which would take that choice away from patients.
They've taken, again, as I understand, they've taken the COVID-19 off the childhood vac schedule, which I definitely support. I think they're still going to make it available. It's what the recommendation is. So no, I'm all for right to try.
So standard
but I'm also
practice
for informed.
Vaccine is not
also
CDC
for informed.
recommended.
I'm
It
also
will
for
generally not
informed.
covered.
I'm also for informed consent, which we were not given with the COVID injection. It was not even close. Did you ever see the package insert?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, it was empty. It was empty. It was empty. It was empty. Okay, intentionally left blank. That's not informed consent. Particularly when we knew, and by the way, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Our report on myocarditis. We're finally, after years of asking for their empirical Bayesian analysis on the safety surveillance systems, we're finally getting some of that, and there will be more reports showing exactly what they knew and exactly what they hid. Myocarditis is just the tip of the iceberg of what they hid in terms of what they knew. By the way, VAERS was pretty obvious too. I mean, you take a look at the number of deaths associated with the vaccines through the entire establishment of VAERS, 21,000 deaths the year 2021. Gee, I think something's happening here that they denied.
For what it's worth, this is anecdotal, the lowest tier of evidence. I work at both Froedtert and at Children's. I'm an acute care physician, so I'm not in the ICU. I'm not in the ER. I have yet to take care of a fully vaccinated COVID patient in the hospital. I have taken care of dozens of unvaccinated or immunocompromised patients that couldn't get vaccinated, and has taken care of 0 patients with vaccine complications.
Well, their doctors have totally different experience.
Microphone number 4 and then microphone number 2.
Oh, didn't realize. Do we have a number 4? Didn't realize.
It's okay. I'm patient. Thank you for coming today. So my name's Tracy Zundel. I'm one of the anesthesiologists here on faculty. I'm heavily involved in medical education. I have appreciated your willingness to engage, and I personally have appreciated your disclosure that corruption and informed consent and increased communication and better communication is what you're striving for with the medical community. How can we be confident that your policies and your party's policies will improve integrity when we have a president who's hosting $1 million dinners and giving favors?
Well, I think I'll just use the example on the one big beautiful bill. I don't know anybody else is pushing back harder against the president's desire to do that than I am.
Good morning. I'm Roy Silverstein, Senator, and I'm a physician.
You do need to get close to the microphone. So
Sure.
how are that?
Is that better?
Yeah.
So yes, my name is Roy Silverstein. I'm a physician here. I'm a hematologist. And this is, graduation time of the year, commencement time of the year. We just had ours a couple of weeks ago. It's 46 years since I graduated from medical school, 50 years since I graduated from college. And I have spent my entire career as a physician taking care of patients with life-threatening blood diseases, doing research on the causes of life-threatening blood diseases, and teaching the next generation of our scientists and physicians. I've probably served on more NIH study sections than anybody else in this room. I've reviewed papers and added
300.
Served on editorial boards, and I can speak with absolute confidence that the peer review process works. It's not broken. Is it perfect? No, no system is perfect, but people do it because of the love for science. And the discussion around the room, I would love to have you participate in an NIH study session and see what it's like. It's a spirited discussion of people who are in wonder of the science that they've read about and do their best to make sure that the best science gets funded. And I look back and I appreciate your history lesson. And I asked the question, if over the last 100 years, we've doubled our investment in government services from up to 26%, why is that bad? What have we seen in that 100 years? 100 years ago, we had children dying of measles. We had children being crippled by polio. We even had smallpox. We had miners dying in coal mines. We had workers dying in industrial accidents. We had tobacco being widely distributed and advertised by the tobacco industry without regulation.
By the way, by doctors saying it's great.
That's right. That's right. But we've learned from that mistake.
That out.
But thanks to the CDC and the NIH investments in public health, we learned that tobacco was a danger. We had a Surgeon General who people trusted. We didn't have politicians claiming that.
But I have to interrupt. That took decades.
Absolutely.
That took decades because those agencies were corrupted by big tobacco. Okay, that took decades for that truth to get out, correct?
It's better.
Again, you got to point things out again.
So again, I appreciate your questions, and I say, what is the rationale for protecting the future of our children when the legislation is being proposed and the cuts to the budgets of the NIH, the CDC, the FDA is actually threatening our children today? What about our children today?
So again, if we don't fix this, there won't be money for any of the. Again, you seem to be whistling by the graveyard. Oh, we can just keep spending.
Well, you know what? There's something called taxes.
Deficits.
I pay my taxes, and I'm proud to pay my taxes.
So
I live in Milwaukee County, one of the highest tax counties in the state. I enjoy living in Milwaukee. I want our children to be educated. It's to my benefit for our children to be educated.
So do I. Okay. So again, let me respond. Okay. First of all, I would recommend a really good book, Dissolving Illusions, which you can laugh at it, but I mean, by and large, we primarily conquered a lot of these diseases through improved sanitation. We stopped living in squalor. I mean, look at facts on that. Okay.
I know the facts.
Again, and I will admit that I'm focusing on the corruption of the science and the agencies during COVID, as it particularly relates to the COVID injection, as well as the sabotage of early treatment using safe generic drugs that, certainly from my anecdotal experience with a lot, saved a lot of people. Okay. Now, I'll give you a quick example. And we'll have a hearing on this. There's an attorney that got called by a family because they were begging the hospital, God, would you just please try it? Would you please just try, these protocols put out by FLCC? And of course, the hospital said no. So they had to sue them. So this attorney sued this hospital, ended up suing representing about 200 different families. This is approximation. Of the 100 cases he won, where the hospitals were forced to administer things like ivermectin, that type of thing, only 2 patients died. Of the 100 cases where he lost, where the hospitals refused to provide these things and just engaged in their protocols, remdesivir, ventilation, they all died. Now, I know that's anecdotal, but I think that'd be kind of.
Not only is it anecdotal, it's not true.
Again, this is, okay.
It's just absolute
so yeah,
corruption.
My knowledge of this is focused on what I've seen during COVID. So I'm sure there's all kinds of high integrity.
I can tell you that at the front lines here at Frederick Medical College of Wisconsin and Children's Hospital, we came to work every day during the pandemic. We took care of desperately ill patients, children and adults, pregnant women, previously healthy people.
And I applaud you for it.
We had terrific outcomes. We had almost none of our staff get sick with COVID because we masked, we were vaccinated, and we practiced social distancing. That's something that. You can talk about anecdotes.
It won't be worthwhile to get a debate back and forth, but I'd love to. And by the way, I'd love to have a panel. Folks from your perspective, and the doctors that I've been participating with. And I've tried to do that, by the way, but I could never get the Anthony Fauci's of the world. I could never get the executives from Pfizer come and engage with those doctors that had a second opinion. Yeah, as long as I've been alive, when it comes to big things, get a second opinion. That wasn't allowed during COVID. It wasn't allowed. A second opinion wasn't allowed. I just gave those doctors a platform to offer a second opinion. Guess we'll go to number one.
Okay, thank you for a good back and forth. We appreciate it. Microphone number one.
Hi, Senator Johnson. My name is Wendy Ehrman. I'm a pediatrician and adolescent medicine specialist here at the Medical College. I'm sure you're aware that there's a lead crisis in Milwaukee Public Schools right now.
Right.
There's at least 9 schools that have significant abatement problems. There's 5 that have been closed. There's over 100 rooms that need to be abated in the school system, costing up to $20 million. Milwaukee Health Department has asked for help from the CDC, which they had up until April when the jobs there were people, the experts of the CDC were laid off. They've asked for epi aid and been denied. Senator Tammy Baldwin has put in a request to RFK Jr. to reinstate the lead experts at the CDC. So my question, there's 2 questions. One is, will you support her in that request to reinstate the lead experts at the CDC? And what will you do to help get rid of or diminish this crisis here in Milwaukee? We need assistance.
First of all, I'd say you have way too much faith in the federal government and too little faith in yourself. It's not exactly like lead poisoning is something that just happened on the scene, and we need some experts. It's not exactly like this is a new issue to Milwaukee Public Schools system, okay? So again, I'm just not a big believer in the federal government. It screws more things up than it solves. And again, guys, understand, my main problem is we are mortgaging our children's future. This can't go on.
But ultimately, prevention saves lives and saves taxpayer dollars.
We've known about lead poisoning for decades. Why hasn't the Milwaukee school system done something about it?
They have.
Does it have to be the federal government coming in and solving all of our local problems? I would argue not. They're incapable of solving problems.
No, it's because they have over 50 schools that are, I think, from between 1950 and 1978, and there's like another 50 that are before.
A lot easier for local officials to handle that than some bureaucrat in Washington spending money that we don't have. Who's going to solve the problem? You got to have somebody from Atlanta coming here and solving the lead problem in Milwaukee. That's absurd.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for your answer, Senator Johnson. Microphone number 3.
Hello, Senator Ron. You're talking about the politicians create fears, so there will be corrupt. I think that's very true. And a friend of MCW told me that she had to bring her legal documents every day in her car. Even there is no policeman stop her for that. So I think Donald Trump is currently creating a fear in academics, in immigrants. So what do you think about it? Do you think it's a start of corruptions? What's your opinion about that?
So first of all, I think we're a nation of immigrants, and it's made America the marvel that we are. I've actually introduced legislation to have a very robust guest worker program, pretty well governed by the states. Problem we had is Joe Biden threw open the border and allowed millions of people into this country unvetted. And that does create a clear and present danger. I mean, just see the crimes that have been committed. So I want a functioning legal immigration system. I'm not real nuts right now about what's happening in terms of foreign students. I think we need to vet them, no doubt about it. We haven't done that in the past. But I want a robust legal immigration system, but we won't have that until we have complete control of our border. And quite honestly, we deport the people who represent a real danger to this nation. So again, unfortunately, Biden threw us way back. I was working with Trump and Jared Kushner in the summer of 2020 on a very common sense legal immigration system. Would have taken about 100 visas down to 6, award them on a metrics basis. We would have taken care of DACA at that point in time. The only reason we didn't push it further is because the Supreme Court was, DACA was in the court system. They wanted to let that play out, and then Donald Trump lost. And Joe Biden came here, opened up the border, and set us back probably years, unfortunately, of a functioning legal immigration system.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions. So we'll go to microphone number 2 and then to microphone number 1, and we'll wrap it up.
Okay. Thank you for being here, Senator Johnson. I'm Joseph Hennessy. I'm an MD PhD student. So I'm a young person, and in your talk, you talked a lot about how the deficit represents transfer of wealth from young to old. And I'm sensitive to that. Of course, you can't spend money that you don't have. But of course, there are two ways to reduce the deficit. One is to cut spending, and the other is to increase revenue. So I'm wondering why you're only focused on one half of that equation, cutting spending, and not opposing these massive tax cuts that disproportionately go to the wealthiest Americans who really don't need that tax cut, and why we're looking at cutting things like Medicaid and funding for critical scientific research on the back of that.
Because I recognize reality, and I'm all for additional revenue through economic growth. And I also realize that over the last 50, 60 years, no matter what the top marginal tax rate, no matter how much we're trying to punish success, it doesn't work. We've had a 90, 70, 50, 36, 28% top marginal tax rate. But over all those years, it's pretty well a flat curve in terms of how much revenue the federal government can extract from the economy. It's about 17.3%. So the best approach is incentivize success. Again, one of the reasons I want to break this big, beautiful bill up in two parts is do what we have to do, but then take the time to simplify and rationalize our tax code. It costs about $400 billion a year to comply with our current tax system. I'd like to reduce those compliance costs. But the way to do it, again, the goal would always be lower the rates, broaden the base, make it a simple system. We make it more and more complex. So again, you're just not going to be able to extract long-term more than 17, 18% of the economy. So you have to recognize that reality and stop spending 24% of our economy. You have to reduce that structural deficit. And again, you continue to punish success, you get less of it, and you'll dry up federal revenue from that standpoint. So you might feel good. Yeah, we're really getting those rich guys. It's those rich guys that invest, risk their capital, build the business, create the types of jobs and opportunity. You can deny that fact, but again, now you're really denying reality.
Well, I'd like to say I disagree with that, but I'll allow time for another question.
Okay. Last question.
By the way, I've never met a poor person that created jobs.
Okay, Dr. Darun Cassini, last question.
Good. Keep denying reality that it's people that have wealth that put the capital to work.
Senator Johnson, my name is Terry Darun Cassini. I'm a professor here and the director of the Comprehensive Injury Center. I'm also a mom of a 14-year-old girl and 11-year-old son. My first part of this is a comment. In 2020, my son almost died. And it was the people at Children's Wisconsin, not Children's Milwaukee, but Children's Wisconsin, who serves children across the state of Wisconsin, your state, who saved my son's life. And so I believe in the medical system, and I believe that his life was saved because he was here. He was here because of the advancements in research and the education. The fellow who saw my son knew exactly what was wrong with him, and it was her fast thinking that led to him having surgery by 2 surgical teams in the middle of the night. So I think you need to understand the wealth of knowledge and science that happens here and education that happens here directly saves lives. And I believe in this system. While I was sitting here, my friend who lives in Waukesha County texted me and asked, I have a dear loved one who has dementia, who needs to see a neurologist. And I need to get him into the best place. And she asked for my recommendation. That happens all the time because people here believe in this system. I'm the director of the Comprehensive Injury Center. As I said, we're one of 11 CDC-funded injury centers across the country, only 11. Trump has zeroed out our budget. And we do research in Wisconsin. We're the only injury prevention center in the state of Wisconsin. We only have ever been the only injury prevention center in the state of Wisconsin. We do work in the Fox Valley to prevent farmer suicide. We do work funding the coup d'oeil on gender-based violence. In the northern part of the state, we collaborate with colleagues in La Crosse on prevention of drowning and for college students. We do work across the state. We also do violence prevention. And Dr. Margolis was correct. The leading cause of children in this country, including in your state, are firearms. That is led actually by suicide. The numbers are driven by firearm-related suicide. That is our youth taking firearms that they have access to and killing themselves. Are you going to support funding injury prevention centers within the CDC who do instrumental work in suicide and violence prevention? Thank you.
So let me, so let me start. Maybe you didn't come in here when I told the story about my daughter. Okay, no, I fully acknowledge that you folks do wonderful things and I am truly appreciative of it, okay? My main point is the federal government doesn't solve that many problems and is mortgaging our children's future, and we have to get it under control. There won't be money for any of these things. Again, you can't continue to incur multi-trillion-dollar year deficits, drive the debt from 37 trillion up to almost 60 in the next 10 years, and expect that this is going to continue. So again, I've said this, somebody's got to be the dad to say, I know everybody wants to go to Disney World. I know we want to fund all these wonderful things. And I'm not saying they're not wonderful things, but we have to get control over this or there won't be money for any of it. So I guess I got to be that guy that has to come into, again, I'm kind of surprised at sort of how hostile these questions have been, but you know, come in, it's fine with me. I mean, I've got thick skin, don't see this bothering me. But I guess I got to be the guy to be that dad that says, we can't afford it. We can't afford it. And again, I'm trying to point out the federal government doesn't do a very good job at where it does spend money on. You guys do a whole lot better job. I have faith in you, far greater faith than I have in the federal health agencies. Again, that's my point. I appreciate what you do. I know you do wonderful things, but this just can't continue. Okay?
Hey, thank you, Senator Johnson. Thanks everybody in the audience for your questions and your participation today. Again, Senator Johnson is our senator. He's here. He wants to know what's on your mind. And I think the audience did a good job of sharing with him what their concerns are. And Senator Johnson did his best to answer the questions. We couldn't ask for anything more than that. So thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for what we do.